98 weeks in Luke, and I'm glad to get out of it. I'm glad we're done. It was good because we got to cover everything in the gospel. But we're going to do some more topical things for a few weeks, and the general title will be about what it means to be wise. So today we have a couple of main scriptures, Deuteronomy chapter 4, verses 5 through 7, and Proverbs chapter 3, 11 through 18. It says that when Jesus started his ministry, they said, "Where did this man get his wisdom?" They were surprised because at that time Jesus was a fairly young man. He was about 30 years old. And ordinarily you would think of a wise person being an older person who had been through a lot of things in life and had come to understand. Yet Jesus was wise as a young person. And so I thought what's wrong here? I thought I had a title slide there. Maybe you have a title slide. Is that the first one? Okay, it's my mistake. Happy are those who find wisdom and those who get understanding. Her income is better than silver, her revenue better than gold. She is more precious than jewels, and nothing you desire can compare with her. This is a wise saying out of the book of Proverbs. One time, not too long ago, somebody said to me, "Why are Jewish people rich?" Well, they're not all rich, but in general, they tend to have more money than others. And I said to them, I can tell you why. It has nothing to do with being stingy. It has to do with being a person who follows the wisdom in the book of Proverbs. Here it says that those who find wisdom and those who get understanding, it's better than silver, it's better than gold, it's better than jewels. And anything that you think that you would desire, it's better to have wisdom. There's a huge difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge, I don't know what your experience has been, but when I was in school, there were a lot of kids that were, A students. And looking back on when I see them at the reunion, some of them didn't have too much wisdom. They had a lot of knowledge. They were able to do their book learning, but they made mistakes in life. How many of you made a mistake in life? Yeah. Anybody want to tell? Probably not. I'll tell a couple so you don't have to. It wasn't wise when I decided to see how fast the 1969 Cadillac would go.
How fast could it go?
Well, the speedometer went to 120 and it was beyond that. Very, very stupid thing to do. Exceedingly stupid. I was young and, everybody when they're young, they have to do something stupid. But, I could have been killed. There were kids in my class that decided to do that with their car, and they're buried in the cemetery over there in Bluefield. It was not wise. It was not wise to drive to the South Shore of Boston and buy 5 pounds of pot because nobody had any. I told that story one day years ago when Bob Green was in the church. He was a lieutenant in the sheriff's office. And after the service, he said to me, "We knew you had it. We were watching you, but we didn't know where it was." Absolutely. I was not a drug dealer, but I decided to do that very unwise thing that one time. And I could be in prison. I could have done time for that. Could have done time for speeding the car 120 miles an hour if I hit somebody and killed them. Very unwise. So knowledge, I knew that you shouldn't drive 120 miles an hour, and I knew you shouldn't buy pot to sell. I knew that was dangerous thing to do, but I didn't have the wisdom not to do it. And there's other kinds of wisdom too, where things that you should do instead of worry about the things you should not do. It says happy, it says in some translations, blessed are those who find wisdom. You have to find it. And it's not easy to find, but there's a whole book in the Bible. Actually, there's 2 or 3 books in the Bible that are on this subject, Proverbs being one of them, the book of Ecclesiastes also, and much of the Psalms as well. Wisdom is better than silver and better than gold. Well, why is it? We'll see. I don't know. Have you ever looked at the YouTubes of people panning for gold? They get the littlest, tiniest specks. They go and they get a big bucket and they sift it and the gold falls to the bottom. In this picture, I don't know how well you can see it, but there's little flecks of gold in the bottom. That's probably a 2-day panning to find that little teeny bit of gold, because they have to have these little specks, and these little specks have to be given to a fire, and the impurities have to be burned off. And when it's all said and done, it's worth $2,000, almost $900 an ounce. If you wanted to buy it today, that's the going price of it. Silver is similar. You know, they found a huge load of silver in Carson City, the Comstock lode, and I've got a little cup at home that some Civil War person gave to my mother when she was a little girl, and it's filled with powdered silver from the Comstock lode. And silver is worth about $31 an ounce today. But these things, it takes great effort to find silver and gold, and it takes great effort to find wisdom, because we don't always just naturally know what the wise thing to do is. And so it says it's better than silver, it's better than gold. Chapter 3, verse 16. Long life is in her right hand. Well, not if you drive 120 necessarily. Not if you are in the habit of taking fentanyl or drinking constantly so that your liver is destroyed, or smoking so that your lungs are destroyed. I was thinking today is March 2nd, which is the day that my father died at age 50 from smoking. That's why when I see people smoking, I'm bound to say to you, don't do that. Live your life. Wisdom can give you a long life, and foolishness can give you a short life. So in the right hand are long life, and in the left hand are the riches. So if you do the wise thing, if you don't spend every single cent down at the coffee shop, if you don't waste your money on stupid things, and you save it and you invest it, then you become rich. I often tell the story of this guy who was a pastor in Village Missions. And Village Missions is an organization where churches give money to the organization, and they look for a place in a community where there's a church building, but there's no pastor. They can't afford to pay the pastor. And so this particular guy spent his life being a pastor in Village Missions. And the idea is that they pay a very small salary to the pastor to go there, and the church provides the housing for the pastor. And they live like paupers. The pastors live like paupers, but they provide ministry to these, places where there wouldn't be any otherwise, very small villages. And my friend was telling me that his friend, who spent his whole life being a pastor in these little churches, when he retired, he got out and he paid cash for a house. And my friend asked him, "How did you pay cash?" He said, "It's simple. Earn more than you spend." Earn more than you spend. He saved his money. I don't know if he put it in the bank or in the stock market or whatever he did, but he didn't take every cent and blow it on video games. Long life is in the right hand. The left hand are riches and honor. Her ways are the ways of pleasantness. How good it would be to have no debt. I can tell you, I've lived my life without debt, but I didn't always. One day I said to Sean when we first came here like 30 years ago, we make good money. We did at that time. We make good money. Why don't we have any money? And we looked, well, we had this credit card bill, and we had this car payment, we had this bank overdraft payment, and we had all these different things that we had to pay each month. And it was robbing us. Proverbs says that the borrower is the slave of the lender, and it's true. When you take your money and you spend it on things that are going down in value, and they're depreciating, and you're still paying the big money on it. So what we did, we took the smallest one, and we stopped buying all this other crap, these other things, these other non-necessary things, which I call crap, and we started paying on that smallest one. And then we took the money that we had to pay on the smallest one, we moved to the next smallest one. And took all the money and paid that down, and then we took the money from this one and from this one, and we paid this one. And then we took those three after that was done, and we paid the big one. And we got to be at a place where we were debt-free. And I can tell you, I don't have upset stomach when I go to bed because I don't owe anybody anything. And it's a great way to live, but it requires some forethought. It's a tree of life. Wisdom is a tree of life. We'll talk about the story of Adam and Eve in the garden, and there's the tree of life is in the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is in the garden. And Eve and Adam, if you read that story, it's not really too clear, and the woman always gets blamed for it, but Adam was standing right there next to her. And they did an unwise thing. The unwise thing was to disobey God. This wisdom is a tree of life. Now, wisdom is personified as a woman. Throughout the book of Proverbs, wisdom, she says, she instructs. She gives proper instruction to her children and to those people who are around her. And it also says in the New Testament that Jesus Christ is the wisdom of God. It says in the Old Testament that God created the universe by his wisdom and makes things all work together properly and in order. And if we get outside of God's order, then problems arise. Now, let's go way back. Moses was the teacher. He lived somewhere, we don't really know when he lived, but it was somewhere at least 1,500 years before Jesus, 1,500 BC, maybe 2,000 BC. And Moses was the one who started the Jewish religion. And Moses was the one who was walking aside one day. He was a bad guy, and he sees this burning bush, and it's not burned up. And so he says, there's something going on here, and God speaks to him, and he says, who are you, Lord? And God says, I am that I am. And he calls Moses into the ministry, and he begins to teach Moses. And he prepares Moses to bring the children of Israel out of their slavery and into the promised land. And at some point, this is what Moses says to the people of Israel. Just as the Lord my God has charged me, now I teach you statutes and ordinances, those are different types of laws, for you to observe in the land which you are about to enter and occupy. And verse 6 says, you must observe them diligently, for this will show your wisdom and discernment to the people. And when they hear all these statutes, they will say, surely this great nation is a wise and discerning people. Now, these two verses have what is known in Hebrew writing parallelism. you'll see that if you read this carefully, that the Lord told Moses how to live in the first phrase in verse 5. And Moses, in turn, is teaching the statutes of God and the ordinance of God to the people who are under him. And so the same thing, this parallelism is in verse 6. So you must observe them. Why? Because you have to teach them to others. You have to be somebody in the community who teaches the children. And so the people will hear say, this is a great, wise nation and discerning people. For what other great nation has God so near to it as the Lord our God is whenever we call on him? There are a lot of things that we can learn if we will pan for the fleck of gold out of the scriptures. There is some amazing stuff in there if you will take the time to read it and take the time to learn it. Some of you have Catholic background, and what do we call this time of year? Lent. Lent means the lengthening of days. It's a 40-day period between Ash Wednesday and Easter. And we are supposed to, according to the Catholic calendar, the church calendar, we are supposed to reflect on things, and we are supposed to give up something in order to concentrate on God, right? That's what it's about. So I would suggest, I mean, we're a little bit into Lent right now, but I would suggest, and well, I can't insist, but I would strongly suggest that you read the 31 chapters in the book of Proverbs for the next 31 days. Who's in? Take a few minutes. When our kids were little, we had a morning, they were homeschooled, and I did the religious instruction in the home, some of it, when we started, and we went through the Proverbs in the morning, and we told, we were talking about industry and, ambition and against laziness and making yourself better. And then one of our kids said to the garbage guy, my dad said, if I don't do my studying, I will end up being a garbage man. And apparently the garbage guy had come, that when we were doing our studies, you want to have a better place in life than that. But one of our kids thought it'd be a good thing to tell the garbage guy that I said that. It was a little bit embarrassing. You know how kids are. It's the same kid that said to somebody in the church on Sunday morning, my mom says don't bring any more of that junk clothing to us. Remember that? How embarrassing that was. But you have to teach.
Which is not what Mom said. It was a different version.
Well, correct me.
No, I mean, he said that, but that's not what I had said.
Oh, okay.
Please stop putting clothes in my car so my kids couldn't fit in the car at the church.
Oh,
Put bags of clothes in, and that was the childhood of it.
I see. It was not good either way. Wisdom. My dad was a restaurateur, and he was the founder of Cheap Charlie's restaurant over in Bluefield. And he was Charlie. And when I was in college, this would have been about 1977 or 78, he had a fairly good chef, but he was very temperamental, and he could fly off the handle. And one day he said, come here, I want to show you something. My dad did. And so he had a room which he called the liquor room, which was a locked room where he would store all the liquor because you have to account for it. You have to buy it from a government source and account for it. And in the liquor room, he had, in boxes from Christie's Specialties, a complete set of pots, pans, knives, everything that you would need in a restaurant kitchen. And he said, you see all this stuff? And I said, yes. He said, someday, Danny, his name was Danny, name's not changed to protect the innocent. He's dead, so it doesn't matter at this point. Someday, Danny is going to get, I won't tell you exactly what he said, but angry, and he's going to pack up all of his stuff out of the kitchen, and he's going to throw it in the trunk of his car, and he's going to drive away on a Saturday night. Within 6 months, it's exactly what happened. And Dad went into the room where he had all the stuff. He got it out, took it in the kitchen, washed it up, and continued to cook. Because he could see what might happen if he didn't. Can you imagine if he wasn't able to do that, and you got people waiting for tables, and they're expecting to get their veal French and their shrimp scampi or their whatever it is that they were going to order? But he could see what could happen, and so he made preparation so that he would mitigate any damage that would happen in a case like this. He was very unwise in some other areas, but when it came to stuff like that, he could predict what might happen. So we are supposed to be, as leaders of our families and as leaders of our community, we're supposed to show wisdom. People are supposed to be able to look at us and say, hey, you know what? Maybe living debt-free is a good thing. Maybe they could look at us and say, maybe homeschooling kids is a good thing, which we did. And so I'm not saying that we're the wisest people in the world, but I'm just saying there are certain things that we can look and be wise about. One of the things that really we agreed with as when we first got married was I had been to a Bible school, and when you go to a Bible school, there's a whole bunch of pastors' kids in the Bible school. And a lot of them don't want to be there. And a lot of them are bitter. The church did this to my father, and we never had any food, and we weren't allowed to go to this place when everybody else was allowed to go, and rah, 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 rah. And this person did this bad to my dad, and this person said this to my mother, and I thought, I don't want my kids like that. I don't want my kids to grow up like that. So we never told our kids that they can't do something because they're pastors' kids. We did tell them they can't do stuff because it's not the right thing to do, but we never said it's because you have to live to a different standard than others. And I know they probably still felt the pastors' kids issue, but it wasn't that we told them they had to do this. And the other thing is that, you know, sometimes in churches, there are people that get angry at the pastor, and they don't like this and they don't like that, and so they go home. I'm not saying that's ever happened here, but they go home and they have roast pastor for Sunday afternoon dinner. And you know what that does? The kids will see that, and they'll say, why would you go to that terrible place? Why should I go there? And the kids will refuse to come if that's the case. And I've seen that over the years. So it wouldn't be wise for us as ministry people to ever talk bad about anybody in church, which we didn't do. And when the kids grew up and they saw sometimes the things that happened, their eyes would be wide like this. Did you? I know you didn't talk bad about us at home because your kids are both in church. And did you make a conscious effort to not say anything bad? Because, I mean, you've seen some bad things, obviously. It's not a table talk. So we must observe some Christian principles diligently, and then people will be able to see God. I want to talk to you about meditation. And I don't mean transcendental meditation. I don't mean Buddhist meditation. You know, the Hindus, their type of meditation is to get, they give somebody a mantra, and their idea is to take all of the thoughts out of the mind and just live at peace because there's nothing in your mind. Well, I don't think that's a good thing. I think having something in your mind is a good thing. But Christian and Hebrew meditation is to take the scriptures, to take Proverbs chapter 1 when you begin to read tomorrow in your commitment that you just made, and don't just read through it, but ask yourself a question. How is the sentence structure? How does it relate to the verse after it? And what is it trying to get? And you can actually hear from God in that way. We aren't really supposed to just read the scriptures. We're supposed to get the scriptures inculcated into our person and into our being, and to see what's right and wrong according to what God says is right and wrong. Because a lot of times we don't even know what's right and wrong. People do whatever, and they just think, oh, this is the way it is. And sometimes they make foolish mistakes. But blessed or happy are those who do not follow the advice of the wicked, or take the path of sinners, or sit in the seat of scoffers. Their delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law they meditate day and night. If they do that, what happens? They're like trees planted by streams of water, which yield their fruit in the season. The leaves do not wither, and all they do, they prosper. The wicked are not so. And it goes on and explains that a little more fully. So here we have a tree again. A tree of life. How do we get the fruit from the tree of life? How do we get the fruits of the Holy Spirit? We get them by aligning ourselves through meditation and study with the wisdom of God, which is plainly clear if we will take time to look at it. I hope you've all read the book of Proverbs at one time or another, but I think it'd really be a good thing for you to do that before Easter. Next slide. Let's go back to the beginning. You all learned this one in Sunday school. Now the serpent, how many of you like snakes? I can always tell when Sean's found a snake because it looks like the flag that says "Don't tread on me," because I'll come in and it'll be all chopped up with a hoe. And I'll say, Sean, don't, they eat the mice and stuff. Don't kill them. If they come on our property, all bets are off. If she sees.
That's my scripture I quote every time I
Well, it's against the law to kill them. And yes, it is.
read.
That it's against the law to kill any snake in New York. Now the serpent, of course, explains why women don't like snakes and why men don't like snakes. The serpent was more crafty than the other wild animal that the Lord had made, any other wild animal. And he said to the woman, "Did God say, 'You shall not eat from any tree in the garden'?" And the woman said to the serpent, "We may eat of the fruit of the trees." But God said, "You shall not eat the fruit of the tree that is in the middle of the garden, nor shall you touch it, or you shall die." Well, God did not say they couldn't touch it, but he did say they couldn't eat it. She added a little bit to it, which we tend to do. The serpent said to the woman, "You will not die." God knows when you eat of it, your eyes will be open and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. So, when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and it was a delight to the eyes, and the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took its fruit and ate. She also gave some to her husband, who was standing right there. He wasn't somewhere else. Who was with her. See, it says that very clearly. And he ate. Now, the tree of life was in the garden as well. They could have just as easily walked over to the tree of life and eat but they instead decided to become wise by disobeying God. That's the meaning of this story. I mean, we're not going to argue about, whether it's a fable. It doesn't matter. The lesson of the story is they caused the whole problem of human sin and sickness because they decided what would make them wise was disobeying God. You see that? On the other hand, wisdom, it says, is a tree of life. Which tree will you eat from? Next slide. My grandmother had a book. It was a big book that the salesman used to come around and sell. It had, supposed to have all the knowledge that was in existence at that time, and they had a picture of Adam and Eve in the book, and my brother and I always liked to look at that picture when we were little kids. We missed the point of the story. We heard the story in Sunday school, but we missed the point of the story. The point of the story is that it's not wise to disobey God, and it is wise to obey God. So which one will you choose? So now, Israel, what does the Lord require of you? Only to fear the Lord, and to walk in his ways, and to love him, and to serve the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and to keep the commandments of the Lord your God and his decrees that I am commanding you today for your own well-being. So we have to ask ourselves, who are those who fear the Lord? He will teach them the way that they should choose. So each of us has a choice of which tree to eat from. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Oh, he's done some good things, but he's done some bad things. Or the tree of life, which has nothing to do with the other. What does the Lord require? Now, I asked this question to somebody the other day. Does it say, is the concept that you shall love the Lord your God, is that a more important concept in the scriptures than you shall fear the Lord? What do you think? Next slide. It says love God 4 times. It says love the Lord 11 times. It says fear the Lord 30 times and fear God 15 times. That means that it says 3 times more often you should fear God than it says you should love God. And, growing up, I heard other preachers say, well, fear doesn't really mean fear. Yes, fear means fear. You can fear God and not do the bad thing, or you can do the bad thing and then fear God. The story of Adam and Eve, if we go on in that story, all of a sudden they're enlightened and they know good and evil. They recognize that they're naked, and God comes walking in the cool of the evening to them, and they hide. They're afraid of God because they've done wrong. And that's why people don't like to come to God, because they don't want to admit that they've done wrong. I mean, generally speaking, that's the truth. But if you fear God, then you don't necessarily do the wrong thing. Many years ago, one of our other kids had the makings of pyromania. He thought fire was fun and pretty. And I caught him lighting a fire in our kitchen. Don't worry, it wasn't Daisy. And I screamed at him. And then shortly after that, I caught him lighting a fire in our bathroom. And I walloped the crap out of him. And he never did it again. Well, he did have another fire after that, but it wasn't intentional. He lit a fire on Easter Sunday of all days. And it was a beautiful hot day, and the wind was blowing about 45 miles an hour, and field on fire. That wasn't good. But that's not where I'm going with the story. But that did happen. So somebody took it upon themselves, because I told the story in church that next Sunday morning, and somebody took it upon themselves to call the Child Protective Services. And they came over and they examined him for bruises, which he had none. And it was unfounded. And fortunately, back in those days, if it was unfounded, they would expunge the record. And so I don't have a record for that. But now, if it was today, that would still be on record. And the guy who came to see our son, he said to him, "Are you afraid of your father?" And he said, "Oh, yes." He was afraid to do it again, because my father was the same way. He allowed us to do almost anything, but he said to us, "If I ever find out you stole anything, I will beat you black and blue." And we believed him. And so it's good to fear God. My mother taught me when I was like 3 or 4 years old, God is watching you. God knows what you're doing. And this is a lesson for adults and for kids. So, would you like some wisdom? It says, if any of you lack wisdom, I mean, there's a lot of things in life that require wisdom, and sometimes it requires supernatural wisdom, not just, reading the book of Proverbs. Sometimes situations you don't know. Sometimes both choices are not good, and you need a third choice, a third way. If you lack, ask God. I think that'd be a good prayer today. He gives to everybody generously if they want it, ungrudgingly, and it will be given you. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. Are you a Three Stooges fan? Anybody? I love the Three Stooges. My mother wouldn't let us watch it because she thought we would hit each other with, pots and pans and stuff like that, yeah. But one day Mo says to Curly, "What kind of a fool do you think I am?" And Curly says, "Is there more than one kind?" And the truth is, according to the book of Proverbs, there are several kinds of fools. And the opposite of wise is fool. And we're supposed to be, Jesus said, if you call your brother a fool, you're in danger of hellfire. But so we ought not to be pointing out and say, well, this one's a fool or that one's a fool. But if we are not wise, we might listen to the snake instead of the Lord, because Jesus Christ is the wisdom of God. Shall we pray? Dear Father, we recognize that we've made many foolish things. We've done many foolish things in life, and we thank you that we have survived them, and that you've been gracious to us. Father, let a spirit of wisdom come upon those in the sound of my voice. Father, we ask you to help us in our lives, that we may live practical lives that are examples of your Son, Jesus. And I thank you in his name. Amen. Thank you for coming. Sorry I went over a little bit. You'll have to get over it or die mad. See you later.